Hello everyone. This is a video about small group instruction. We're going to talk about what it is, why we should do it, and what are some of the best practices for implementing it in your classroom. So let's start with a definition. Traditionally, small group instruction was something that followed whole group instruction. It was meant to reinforce or reteach specific skills and concepts to students, and it was able to better differentiate instruction by having a reduced student-teacher ratio. I will note that speaking as the blended learning coordinator, I would argue that this definition is out of date. We now can have small group instruction without having had whole group instruction first if we properly use data from pre-assessments to group our students. But more about that later. So, do you know why we're using small group instruction? Sure, having that smaller ratio of student to teacher is really beneficial, but what's the purpose? Well, there are three major reasons for using small group instruction. The first is probably the most obvious, and that's differentiation. By having small groups of students who have similar needs, you can better meet the needs of each child rather than trying to differentiate in whole group instruction time. But also, this allows you to maximize your time. Rather than teaching to the whole group and having maybe only about a third get the instruction that they need, when you identify students and group them appropriately in small groups, you're giving them exactly what they need, whether that's remediation or extension. Also, it's a lot easier to build those student-teacher relationships when you're in a smaller group than it is when you're teaching to everyone at once. And building those relationships, fostering that sense of collaboration between teachers and students, really can help students feel like not only that you care about them, but that they're getting what they need in order to be successful. But before we begin small group instruction, it's really important that students understand the directions and routines and expectations that you have of them. Just like any different routines that you practice at the beginning of the school year, knowing how to work in small groups is one of the things you should practice because there's a lot of moving parts. Students need to know how they're going to know which groups they're in each day. Students are going to need to know what's expected of them as they transition from station to station. Also, what if students are working independently and they have a question, but you're busy with another small group? What kind of protocols are you going to have? There's a lot of different options, but it's important that students know these from the beginning. Furthermore, it's important that you think about planning activities that students truly can do either independently or in groups without your immediate supervision. And there needs to be an accountability piece. How are you going to know that they did what they were supposed to do when you weren't right there working with them? And please make sure you keep in mind that these routines and these directions should be consistent. These should be something that the kids know how to do on a day-to-day basis. Finally, directions for each station should be there physically at the station when they arrive. There's nothing worse than trying to give a set of oral instructions about all the different stations you're going to go to in a day, and then the minute the students get up and move, they're asking, wait, what was I supposed to do at this station? Giving them a way to be accountable and a way to be responsible for themselves at each station is really important. So let's talk about these kind of effective practices that we need to have overall that are especially important when we're looking at small group instruction. Obviously, these kind of goals are things that we keep in mind during our pedagogy all the time, but they become really important when children are working either independently or in small groups. It's important that just because it's an activity students can do without your immediate supervision doesn't mean that it's just busy work, that it's not something that is still establishing a goal, that's being purposeful, that's providing some sort of productive struggle, that their conceptual understanding is being built, and that you have some sort of evidence of the thinking they did while they were working in small groups without you. This is really important because if you're working with just one small group at a time, the rest of the students need to do something that's still connected to the overarching theme that's going on in your current unit, so that it's not just different work that's disconnected at different stations. Everything has to be tied together to an essential question. And then how do you decide how to put these students into different groups? Well, you have a lot of different options. This is why we formatively assess as we're going on. And there's so many different ways to do this. As a teacher, you are both formally and informally checking in on whether your students understand all the time. And you're able to use that data to put them into appropriate groups so that you know that the students you're working with in a small group all have a similar need. Whether that need is a specific skill they need remediation on, or perhaps this is a group of students who have already mastered that particular content and they're ready for something new. It's important that these groups are made with a mindful thought process and that you use actual data when you're deciding how to group your students. And this all goes back to the data-driven instruction cycle, which is nothing new. But we need to understand that we need to have some sort of data that we analyze, that we look at, and that leads us to take an action, whether that action is pulling students for a small group, giving them some sort of independent practice or group work, or a tech-based assessment. And then once they take another assessment, we use that data and we analyze it and we continue the cycle again and again. This is something that should always be continuously happening. Students should be changing groups all the time because we're always assessing them, we're always looking at how they're doing, and we're always deciding, okay, if you did well on this, you now move on to this. If you struggled with this, we now have to remediate you and make sure you understand before you can move on. We understand this cycle very well, and by putting students into small groups appropriately, we can be the most effective. Remember, at the end of the day, pulling students for small group is really all about building that engagement, fostering those relationships, and meeting the needs of every child. It's so much easier to get all these things done when we have just a small group in front of us whose needs we can really focus on, as opposed to trying to meet the needs of every single student in the classroom all at once. So let's make sure we use small group instruction to be more effective in meeting the needs of every child. For more information, you can feel free to contact me at any one of these numerous places, and I will be happy to help you on your journey in using small group instruction effectively. Thank you and have a great day.